We are here back again on a Thursday, a little earlier than normal, but it's great all the same. We have two amazing guests for our Think and Link Brand New World. And this is an incredibly timely one with Shawn and DeAnna, our guests. The changes that are going on in our culture may not be as drastic and as scary when we were exiting our business to go to our homes and leave an office building to go find a place at home and set up an office. But it is still dramatic, and we're in a really interesting place. So this is going to be an incredibly timely and interesting discussion with two of these. Shawn being a client of ours, worked with on a couple of really interesting and successful projects that I don't know that we'll cover as much, though I hope we do at least touch them a little bit. And DeAnna has become a very close friend of the firm very quickly because of what she does and her perspective, which will be very interesting. But first, before we get into this, before I hand it over to Kelly for the first question, I want to make sure our number one sponsor here in Minneapolis, Capsule, the special projects firm, we put this on as inspiration for our friends and our colleagues and our people in our community to have a conversation on the timely things that are going on around us. And culture is definitely one of those things. When we moved our offices, people talked a lot about, this is back in, well, what would it be, 10 years ago or more. We talked about the fact that the change in office space can have an impact on culture. Well, everybody, in a professional setting changed their office space, right? So that's going to have an impact on a lot of cultures, and it's going to create some turmoil, some scariness. Anyway, so we are Capsule, and you can go to capsule.us to find out more about us. But I'm going to hand it over to Kelly to fill any gaps that I missed.
Actually, no, yes. Great introduction, Aaron, as always.
Thank you.
And Shawn and DeAnna, we're obviously extremely happy to have you here on our Think and Link stage today. I would actually love it if we could start with a little background, if I could turn it over to both of you to give a little background about your journey, your career, and some of the changes that you've seen over the last decade. So Shawn, we'll start with you. If you could give us a little background, and then we'll turn it over to DeAnna.
Yeah, so actually DeAnna and I thought it would be fun to introduce each other. So I'm going to talk to you about DeAnna. So sometimes it's nice when somebody else talks about you instead of we talk about ourselves. So I just want you to know a little bit about my good friend and my mentor and coach, DeAnna Murphy. So she's the Chief Development Officer of a global leadership development organization called People Acuity, and she's an organizational psychologist by training. She's a recognized strength and leadership expert, a top 100 global coaching leader. And so People Acuity, this is a company she founded, is a talent pipeline and career pathing technology platform company. And they work in partnership with employers to construct guided career paths and talent pipelines to meet defined employer and industry needs. I worked with DeAnna personally. I did some one-on-one coaching with her during COVID because as we're going through COVID, I think we all had a hard reset about our lives, our perspectives, what's important to us. And I think we were all trying to find more joy in our personal lives, joy in work, joy in the outdoors, which is where my industry is focused. And I certainly went through that myself, and I reached out to DeAnna, and I had some just phenomenal personal coaching and coaching with the People Acuity team to learn more about myself, to learn where different aspects of depletion were coming from in my personal life and my career that I needed to resolve and sort of shift up and bring myself up to the level I wanted to be at personally, from a happiness standpoint, from a professional standpoint, to be more successful, to be able to thrive in this new life, in this new world that we're all living in. So that's a little bit about my friend DeAnna. I can't wait for everybody here to be able to meet her in this little hour. And I hope that many people will reach out to her like I did afterwards and find more work joy and how to become more successful in their lives and have happiness as they do so. So that's a little bit about DeAnna.
Thanks, Shawn.
I'd love to just reciprocate and just share what you've all just heard is speaking to what makes Shawn great, what makes great leaders great. there's always an inside out ripple effect. And leaders who are conscientious about their own growth can't help but grow and lift other people. And so you've just heard from Shawn about what a mindset that has made a big difference in his leadership. His leadership is actually amazing. He's the president of North America Katadyn and oversees 4 different companies in the United States and Canada. One of the things that was astounding to me as you look at his leadership over the last 10 or 12 years, he has produced 67% gain across that time and delivered 60% of the revenues of the entire international organization here. And so you can see from his output, the outcomes always tell you about the mindset of the man and the actions, because you don't ever get strong results if you don't have solid mindset that precedes our ability to act and do differently. So I have a great respect for Shawn. He lives here in Minnesota, but he's from Colorado. He's married to Julie and has 4 college students, and he is just a fantastic father and husband and friend. So we've become dear friends and friends with their family over the course of our professional association as well. So I'm really glad to be with Shawn here today and with the 2 of you. Thanks, Kelly and Aaron, for letting us be here.
Absolutely. Thank you. I love to see the joy when both of you light up when you talk about each other, the reciprocity in terms of how you've given to and inspired each other. So again, we're excited about this pairing today, simply for that reason, of course, and of course, the knowledge that you're going to bestow upon us today, which I'd love to jump right in if we can. And DeAnna, we were talking about this before we started here at the top of the hour, some of the statistics, frightening statistics with regard to retention of employees and how are we recruiting and retaining and what people are longing for to bring that work joy. If we could talk a little bit, let's start with not a doomsday scenario, but it is something we need to address and recognize, of course, but would love to hear both of your perspectives ultimately around how organizations can continue to successfully recruit, retain, talent people, and what mindsets and behaviors need to shift within organizations to really attract good people. DeAnna, if you could start, and then I'd love, Shawn, to hear your thoughts as well.
Let me start by perhaps just spelling out the problem, because I think things are moving so fast right now in the market that it's really tough to stay abreast of it. I was sharing with Kelly and Aaron earlier that a new Business Insider report came out just last month indicating that 95% of employees are thinking about quitting. That number has increased from 40% in March. So there's a really big trend happening, and it's a little frightening when you start to consider that the cost for replacing an employee is 16% for a salaried hour or an hourly employee, all the way up to 213% for an executive. I mean, that's really expensive. And as we're trying to reboot the economy, and in some cases reboot our businesses, you don't want to have all brand new people trying to do that. And that's a little frightening if you stop and see what's going on. I think if you look at the statistics, the other thing that it does, it starts to tell you why people are leaving and what helps people stay. So from that perspective, again, let's just stick with some hard data for a moment. It's interesting because 80% of employees believe their company is not doing a great job growing them. It's really interesting. 80% believe that they're not having the growth opportunities. And if you think about millennials, they're the biggest generation of workers right now. Their average tenure is 2.8 years, and most of them don't expect to be in a job more than 3 years. They will not stay if they're not growing. And just another piece of data that I find interesting anyway, 50%, and I think it's a little bit of a generational thing, 50% of employees believe it's not their job to grow themselves. So they don't have Shawn's mindset. They're waiting to be grown. They're waiting for something to happen to them so they can then have the growth that they believe is important. You got 29% of those people who are exiting today are saying, I'm leaving because I'm not getting the growth I want. I think that's interesting. Let's throw one more statistic in there, and then Shawn and I can maybe chat a little bit about how do we recruit and retain. But I think it's also interesting. The other thing that is really curious to me, if you say, why do people stay? Even if things are hard, even if they're struggling, 49% of employees stay because of the relationships. So when you build strong relationships with people, people are loyal to people. People often leave people. So even if I'm not quite getting the growth I want, if the relationships are loyal and strong, well, then I'm going to believe that you'll help me enough that I'll stay and anchor in there. So it's probably, at least to start with, some of the data, and all of that, all of those statistics are just in the last 6 months. So it's a little staggering to me to stop and think about what's happening. So,
wow.
Shawn, I don't know, maybe you have a different perspective, but those are some of the things I'm seeing and watching some of the trends.
No, you're absolutely right. I just had a conversation this morning with my management team about that, about the shift and the change and trying to keep up with people. I felt like during COVID, we had to overcompensate as a management team globally to show tremendous more appreciation and understanding and sensitivity to people compared to what we did before. And in fact, I felt like we were overcompensating. Probably what we were doing is catching up a little bit with where we should have been. And I think, everybody had to do that because people were going through trauma. They were going through family sicknesses, illnesses, death. The world was imploding, and it was really hard, and everything changed. All our paradigm totally shifted, right, in our lives. I mean, looking at that, you have a hard reset personally and professionally and corporate in the corporation. What are our priorities? What's this all about? What do am I adding value? Am I happy? Is this good for me? And I certainly went through that. Knowing that I went through that, we all went through that. If somebody were to ask me, Shawn, what's your greatest success in your company? I would say it's the people that I work with and the people that I develop and the interaction that I had. If somebody were to say, what's your biggest failure in your company? I would say those times when I didn't develop people and work with people and help people be successful, whether they left on their own or I had to invite them to leave. I look back on those with a lot of sadness, wishing I would have had more skills, abilities, talents, understanding, empathy to be able to work with them and help them or put them into another position. We have a company culture called the mistake culture, where we believe people should make mistakes. They need to be able to work and grow and try things and make mistakes. And if they're making mistakes, we can coach and learn from those mistakes. If we're making mistakes constantly and we can't fix them, then likely they're just in the wrong position. It's not that they're a bad person, they're likely just in the wrong position, and we can shift the positions around. But yeah, we're definitely in a transitionary period. Everybody feels that. And I think, DeAnna, you're right on.
Right, yeah, that's helpful. Go ahead, DeAnna.
I was just going to say it's a little interesting because on the employer side, so of course on one hand we're wanting to recruit and retain, and yet it's a noticing that with all the situational factors, getting people engaged, filled with work joy, excited about being involved in work is trickier than I think it used to be. So let's go back to your question. There's an interesting thing. So one more thing I was thinking about as I was listening to Shawn is, while employees are waiting to be grown, ironically, 54% of them don't feel. So there's a lack of confidence that they've got the skills that are needed. That's ironic, right? So they're a little worried that I can't bring what is needed. So sometimes we could say, well, if the relationships were better, they're growing us, then I'm happy. The other thing is just noticing that fear and the worry about not being enough. This whole piece that Shawn pointed to, it's such a simple thing, but that valuing and appreciating and recognizing and having, we call it micro conversations. In the past, we have a once a year conversation, a performance review with our manager. That is so outdated. If you listen to Shawn again, you can hear why he's such a great leader, because his primary belief is, as a leader, my first job is growing my people. And if I grow my people, then the results will follow. And he's living proof that it's true. And when you said, what's the mindset that has to change, Kelly? Well, here's the first one. We've got to think differently about management. So the manager, think about who the managers typically are. They have been star performers that got promoted because they were good at what they did. Well, so then what I see, I've coached probably thousands at this point, mid-level managers, and they come in with the mindset they had as a star performer, thinking now my job is to tell everybody else what I did that made me great, that will make them great. And the second you start to tell people, especially millennials, it's just like this. They're not hearing it. And so there's a mindset shift about what does it mean to be a manager. And it's not telling people what to do. It's growing people. It's using a work experience as a sandbox to grow people so they get better at connecting the dots between here's what we care about as a company. Here's what you care about. This is what your purpose is. This is how it connects to the company's purpose. This is where you add value. This is where we get to stretch you and grow because you've got a contribution to make. It's right here. And remember that the 54% of employees who are going, I don't think I've got what I need. They need somebody to be talking with them about it. So we talk about, it's not sit down and have a coaching conversation once a week or once a month for an hour. It's micro conversations. And they're conversations that focus on purpose and role clarity and success patterns and growth in the sense of let's take a situation or challenge that you're facing. Let's help you bring your strengths to that situation and resolve it for yourself so you grow yourself through that. Because remember, 50% of them are going, I can't do it anyway. I'm waiting for you to grow me.
Right.
Yeah. This is really interesting. I've been, you can't tell by my face, but I wanted to jump in this entire time because I'm listening to this through the lens of an employer and a past employee. And now I'm trying to put myself in the context of, okay, I want Shawn's job, right? I want to take over Shawn's job. Maybe he'll be promoted. Maybe I'll just push him out. I'll just take his job. But what do I have to do? I have to grow myself to do that, right? But do I need Shawn to grow me? Do I need Katadyn to grow me? I don't know. I think that's on the responsibility of me, but I get your point about those damn millennials. And I don't know that it's necessarily all of them to blame because they also do some great things like consume a lot, which is great. They do great things. But there is kind of an interesting perspective on how we are growing as individuals. And this has shuffled everything, this movement. And part of me just believes it's like just the basic idea of the change in venue that everybody had to go through has the physical world has more of an impact on our psychology than we realize in most cases.
Yeah, DeAnna taught me something that's just really, really powerful related to this, and so did her team. It's really, most of us at times we're working in a sort of a low energy, low performance depletion zone where we're just not happy, we're not performing, our teams aren't performing, and DeAnna's whole focus is to help people shift up and get into what's called the optimal zone, where they're really working with high energy, high performance, high results. And the way to get there is through interdependent leadership. And DeAnna, you need to talk a little bit about that because it's brilliant. I mean, this interdependent leadership, it's not about them, him or her or me, it's us.
I love that you said that. It's Aaron. I just wanted to point to there's a real synergy developing in this conversation as you start to think about these millennials will give you their heart and soul if you know the right buttons to push. And they will be deeply loyal and they will give you everything. And it is a noticing the word that was coming up for me when I was listening to you, Aaron and Shawn, then just what you were adding is self-leadership. No one can do self-leadership to me. It is a choice that I must make. And it requires, there are two pieces. One is that I have to recognize how I'm seeing. And when I'm not seen in ways that are going to boost my energy and performance to the optimal zone and take others with me. And I have to then influence the way I'm seen, which will then influence my actions and my outcomes. Again, this is one of the things I deeply revere about Shawn. He's very mindful. He uses his negative feelings as a feedback mechanism, not to say I should be blaming someone. Interestingly enough, right? Because blame is so darn high right now in our culture. In fact, in a study we did in 2018, we were astounded at the number of individuals who believed that 83% of employees were believing that their companies were filled with blame, which is staggering to me. And when we started to do some of the cross-examination, the factor analysis around that, we found that if you believed that other people were responsible, not you, so that you don't have self-leadership, you're blaming other people. The likelihood that you would take responsibility to try to solve a problem was only 5%.
Wow.
The likelihood that you would be engaged, 3%.
Yeah.
The likelihood that you would feel connected to other people, a sense of team and belonging, 4%. So you start to go, high blame, low self-leadership, people not taking responsibility. How are we going to solve that?
Right.
And it's the first thing, it's inside out. If self-leadership doesn't happen, nothing else happens.
Yeah.
So,
Self-leadership.
Self-leadership. I like that too. That's a great term. And DeAnna, in the same vein, and we've talked about in some previous conversations, how are we creating environments whereas there's this reciprocity between leadership, employees, but an authentic, this is where culture comes into play. You can't, I've heard the argument, you can't create a culture, or you can't drive it if there's no attachment from your employees to that culture of an understanding. Can we talk a little bit about some practical applications of creating that environment where there is that reciprocal relationship between leadership, employees, that drives that motivation and that loyalty and that work joy, right? I'd love to hear, DeAnna, from you. And then Shawn, how have you applied some of these methodologies within your own organization?
You know, what's coming up for me, Kelly, as I listen to you, is I'm thinking case study. So I'm thinking, if I'm a leader listening right now, I'm thinking, let's not do theory here. Tell me how someone has actually done this. So if I could, let me take you to a case study, ironically in Africa, but there's a lot to be gleaned. So we became acquainted with Barclays Bank of Kenya. So Barclays Bank, 5th largest bank in the world. They had a huge holding throughout Africa. We became acquainted with them before they sold their shares to ABSA and became ABSA Bank. And so we were a part of that cross-pollination. When we came in, it was really interesting. Here was the theory. The theory was that in order for employees to take responsibility for their own engagement and work joy, Kelly, to your idea about work joy, they had to first see, what are my unique contributions? If I can't see what my puzzle piece is, I'm walking around holding it like this, scared that I've got the wrong puzzle piece and I'm going to put it in the wrong place and I'm going to screw it up. So let's get clear on what are the contributions that the employee uniquely has to offer. The second piece that was important was to help them flip their mindset into thinking about we. And this is the interdependence piece that Shawn was talking to, because if you think about the prevalence of blame, suggests a mindset of, guess who? Me. Me, protecting me. It's you did this to me. You should take care of me. It's me. Or forget it. I'm ignoring all of you. I don't trust any of you. You're not going to do what I think you should. So I'm just ignoring you. I'm going to go do my silo thing, and I'll do my work in silos. And you see siloism all over in organizations. Or worse yet, here's the other pattern that I see is, and in fact, I believe it's the prevailing pattern on organizations today, is a pattern of codependence. I will if you will. I'll do this if you do this. Brad Shuck, who's one of the foremost researchers around engagement, talks about the prevalence of the mindset that employees have that says, I will engage if you give me X, Y, and Z. It's a negotiation tactic. It's a mindset of codependence. It's transactional. And you have to rise above that whole shift up thing to another mindset. And the mindset is I serve us so we can serve others. It's a mindset of interdependence, and everybody's part of us. So I sometimes will pay attention to my own needs so that when my feelings are negative, I can recover back to being in service of others. And so it's not bad that you're thinking about yourself, but you have to teach that. So Barclays Bank of Kenya, that became ABSA, decided to undertake this project. We did an in-depth work with about 20 of their key top managers and leaders, who then became a cohort of coaches. And we followed it with kind of a one-day experience through the entire Bank of Kenya. And it taught those three principles. So let's understand, what are your unique contributions? How do they form your purpose? And how do we get to us instead of just me? And then how does your purpose and your contributions link with the needs of your team and the bank? Now, just let me give you results straight out of the chute, because this was really important. Their active disengagement. Now, your active disengaged employees are the ones that are trying to sink the organization. And it's scary if you've got actively disengaged people. Their active disengagement decreased by 1/3 over an 18-month period, where we did this with the leaders and managers, and then they took that to the people, which was very important. It was their face. It was their one-on-one conversations. They sat one-on-one with people. They looked at strengths. They talked purpose. Their engagement overall across I think there were 3,000 or 4,000 people in the region, increased by 21% in 18 months.
Wow.
Engagement and work joy go like this. So it was, again, it's going back to the growth factors. So let's go back to the statistics we started with. It's the growth factors. So they grew their people and helped their people see their strengths, see how they fit, understand their purpose, see their purpose in the context of the overall organization, and then leveraged that to help people grow. Now, it's interesting because ABSA Bank of Kenya, we're now looking at taking this entire project to the entire continent because it was so effective regionally. It included micro conversations. Remember we talked about micro conversations? This isn't big, long conversations. It could be 5 minutes as you pass someone in the hallway that has these key purposes. And you could hear that those purposes are going to match back to the things we were talking about. We have to help people stay connected to purpose. Your millennials are the most purpose-driven generation of our entire time. If they see how their purpose links to the organization's purpose, and if they can see how their strengths lead to purpose, they will be on fire. And they will not leave you. They will be the people that will grow your organization. True story. Aaron, I can see your eagerness to jump in.
I'm anxious. Yes, I want to ask another question because I love the micro conversations. I'm a huge fan, do it all the time. And I believe in it more than reviews or coaching sessions, or because those are, you separate out time, you put it on the calendar, you know, everybody gets mentally prepared for it. You know, you prepare documents. There's all kinds of other stuff that goes with it, which basically creates a bunch of shields and doesn't allow people to break down and say, okay, let's just have a basic conversation about how you're doing today, right? And little 5-minute ones in between. I love that. Micro conversations. But it does bring about the question of like, well, those went away during the pandemic. I mean, if I have to do that via Zoom, you don't do a Zoom micro conversation unless it's like the right before a Zoom, like we just had before this one started, right?
But there's other tools. We're using like Slack. Slack is a micro conversation where we're having side conversations all day long on Slack. You know, about my team and I. So I found there's other tools. So we don't just have to just rely on some tools we can do. And that's what's great is in today's world, I'm like that. You know, we're all working from home still with Katadyn at North America here in Minneapolis. And we're just doing micro conversations all day long on Slack.
So technology has helped sort of elevate. It's a new way of having these micro conversations, still connecting, right?
And millennials love it. Like that, they love it. They're like just, you know, they're the everything on the phone. So good noticing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing how they're bringing us slightly aged crowd into that and doing the Slack conversations or Slack video or whatever it's called. That's happening to me every once in a while, right? Anyway, you have something.
Aaron, if I could just, I was seeing something. There's another piece that, Shawn mentioned interdependence. And one of the hardest parts of interdependence, it's the balancing act. It's the balancing act. It's not just me balancing my contributions and needs with you, balancing your contributions and needs with me. It's like that complexity. And then if the four of us are a team, then we've got to balance our contributions and needs with each other. The first challenge is it's a self-leadership challenge of how do I balance the task and relationship poles in my life. It's interesting, if you go to strengths, you probably don't want this level of detail, but some strengths are task-oriented, some are relational-oriented, and most of us are wired with both. It's almost like there's a push inside of ourselves. Again, case study. Yesterday, I'm coaching a mid-level manager, and he, by the way, is preparing. It's a succession planning coaching to position him to become the new sales manager in his organization. And one of the things we were talking about, he's got a time management challenge. He's very relationally driven. So managing and organizing his tasks is very difficult for him. And he recognizes that if he's going to become the sales manager, time management will kick him in the butt if he hasn't figured it out. And as we started talking about, okay, let's coach through a strategy of how to help you get your arms around your time. And the guy who's all relational in his strengths, guess what the first thing he does is he starts to identify what's important to me today. He went right down his task list and ignored all the relational pieces. And it was like, okay, good job. You've got the first half. Now let's think about who are the people that are really important to you, that if you don't connect with them today, it will affect your performance and the performance of your team and maybe your family. And he said, oh, light bulb. And so he said, here, I see it. Now I've got it. Here's the form. I'm going to create it for myself. I'm going to identify my 5 most important priorities every day. And then I'm going to have this list. And each one of the guys on my team are going to be on the list. And every member of my family, my wife and each of my children, and every day I'm going to check the box to make sure that I've stopped to have a 5-minute conversation with each one. It's a micro conversation, Aaron, right? So it's, let's stop. Let's have the micro conversation. Let's check in around success patterns. Let's check in around what's working for you. Let's check in around, is something getting in your way today? And just have a conversation about how we in our synergy can resolve that. And he got so excited. He said, I can do that. I can do that. Balancing task to relationship and the strategies around it are tricky. And Aaron, to your point, it says we've got to make people, especially task-oriented leaders, then you put people on your task list. That will help you balance it.
Yeah.
Adding some structure. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Right. Huh.
Yeah.
Gosh,
fascinating.
So fascinating. I can't wait to go back and review everything that you're sharing, because it's a lot of great information, I'm sure, for our listeners and our audience. Shawn, not to put you on the spot with regard to what resonated with you most in your coaching sessions with DeAnna, but I'm curious if there's 1 or 2, again, practical applications of what you've learned through your sessions with DeAnna that you've applied, that you're like, it was intuitive, it worked wonderfully within my organization. Anything that comes to mind that you could share?
Yeah, like DeAnna said, first of all, that's the thing that was really, really meaningful to me. I think I was going through a time in my life where I was feeling, I wasn't feeling good about myself. And, I think maybe a lot of us are going through that. And it was affecting my work joy, but it was affecting my leadership. It was affecting my output. And to work with DeAnna to understand what my strengths were and to start recognizing how those strengths contributed to my organization. And even I was thinking in the back of my mind, my family, my marriage, all these things. And then also to understand, some of my weaknesses that were blind spots that I wasn't seeing before. Really, it helped me get back in touch with myself It helped me feel good about myself again, because it's really, really hard to lead organizations if you're not feeling good about yourself. Right. If you're not seeing those things in yourself, that how you can contribute and how you can add value and how you can take the company to the next level. And that's what triggered me to come work with DeAnna was I needed that, you know. And then to be able to do that for myself, the first thing that I feel when I go through that is, I want to share this with my team. My team needs this. I'm excited for them to learn about this, because, you know, they need, I want them to have the same feeling, the same understanding, the same experience that I had, so that they can shift up the way I feel like I shifted up, because I can't shift up without them shifting up. And so for all of us to see how we can level up to be better, it really created this sort of independent leadership organization, where we're interdependent leadership organization, where we're working with each other, helping each other and seeing each other better. And also just to be able to not only understand my strengths better through this Clifton Strengths Finder that DeAnna helped us engage in, but also to see my team's strengths better and then utilize their strengths better in the right ways, really helped me and help them, help us to become much more proactive and just feel better about working with each other, seeing things in each other, not in a judgmental way, but just in a more understanding way.
Right. That's great.
Yeah. Oh, that's really good.
DeAnna's right. It does start with self-leadership. When we start there, then we can truly get into this interdependent leadership where we coordinate better, work better, understand better, listen better to other people. And I recognized I didn't do that as well as I should have before, until I started working with DeAnna and through People Acuity.
Yeah. It's a great story.
You talked about this last time when we chatted, Shawn, about the empathy piece, that, or maybe DeAnna pointed it out, that you don't express your empathy fairly clearly. Which is, I thought was fascinating when she first said it. I'm like, oh yeah, I see that. But I love how you put this out there. You're just like, this was me. I wasn't feeling good about my job. I wasn't feeling good about what I was doing. It was affecting me. I mean, just like, it's almost like a testimony of where you were at that moment. It's very elegant.
It is.
Yeah.
It seems like there's a vulnerability that has to come with this too, right? I mean, leaders have to say, I've got to make myself vulnerable. I've got to be open to the change and again, identifying, Shawn, as you mentioned, those blind spots, and not see them as a weakness that's to the detriment of you as a person or your organization, but this is what I can do. I can lean into strengthening or finding those gaps. So
yeah.
Yes. DeAnna, you had something you were going to say.
I felt a bit of an urge, because one of the core principles of being effective in leading yourself is what we call confident vulnerability. I think a lot of leaders cringe when you say the word vulnerability.
Right.
It's like, just go ahead and put it out there. It's like, I don't think so. It's just, it feels different when you pair confidence with vulnerability. It's this place of, I've got strengths and I've got weaknesses. This doesn't make me good and this doesn't make me bad. It makes me human. We teach leaders all the time. Look, don't pretend that you don't have weakness. People know you have weakness. And when you put it out there, people will respect you. And if you put your weakness behind your back, if you think about metaphorically doing that, well, one, it bites you in the butt. Two, you can't see it. And if you can't see it, then you also can't bring your strengths to help mitigate it, nor can you allow other people to complete you. So leading with confident vulnerability is really, it's elevating, it's relief. You don't have to do pretense. It allows you to be who you are and own it. And it gives other people, remember those 54% who are all walking around going, I'm not good enough and I don't think I can do it. Well, if you lead with confident vulnerability, it gives them courage to do the same. Then they stop pretending with you. Then they have the real conversations about what's going on. And maybe they tell you before they quit. Maybe there'd be room for a conversation, because if the relationship is strong, remember, the likelihood of their staying exponentially increases. And confident vulnerability creates that connection that binds people and creates loyalty. So you hit something, Kelly, and Shawn was definitely visually giving us a model of what confident vulnerability might look like.
Yeah, that's great.
I feel like there's go Kelly, unless
No,
you have
Aaron,
something.
I don't know.
I feel like there's some really, and I'd like each of your perspectives on this. There's some overlap here in the entrepreneurial mindset. The thing that I've talked about forever is that once you become an entrepreneur, you can't lie to yourself anymore. There's no way. I mean, you can sit around and blame everybody else. You can, lie to yourself and say, I'm good at this, and continue to push that and try to do that, whatever that is, and then fail in business. And that can be obviously very painful. But there's almost a complete overlap with what you're talking about, man, and the entrepreneurial mindset but then the conflict comes with the entrepreneur being able to say, I'm not good at this to everybody else on the team, which that is an interesting challenge for entrepreneurs to do, right? Because, look at the iconic entrepreneurs out there that people look at, Steve Jobs, he did a lot of swearing, but and there was a lot of crying, but I don't remember a lot of I'm not good at this kind of stuff. You know what I mean? It's an interesting cultural challenge you face when you're trying to get people to make that switch. Anyway, so I don't know if you have a perspective on that, DeAnna.
Well, I might have one, and I believe Shawn probably, as he's thinking about his own journey, would see one as well. Here's what I think happens. The journey of self-leadership is a journey of anchoring with integrity into who you really are. And who we really are is we're strong and we're weak. It is interesting. Now, Kelly, you use the word or phrase blind spot. Lots of leaders are fearful of their blind spot. Blind spot implies what I can't see or don't know because I lack the strengths. Interestingly, if you look at the research, it's curious to me that the weaknesses that get us most in trouble are not the blind spot, what I can't see or don't know. What most gets us into trouble is when we misuse or overuse our strengths to the point that they become detrimental to us and others. That kills energy and destroys trust and depletes everybody. And so to understand strengths courageously, to not fear weakness, to believe that my strengths can actually help mitigate my own weakness, means that the experience of it decreases. We define weakness as a way of being or doing that influences you or others to low energy and performance, to depletion, and a strength as a way of being or doing that lifts you, influences you and others up to high energy and performance. That means the strength finder or the strengths assessment language people are used to using, that isn't always a strength. Responsibility is a Clifton Strength Finder's strength taken too far, leads to overcommitment, high stress, and burnout to the point that people quit. And it is interesting that a lot of people are quitting today because of burnout. And their strengths can take them there.
Right.
I'm the perfect case study in that. I was exactly that way. One of my top strengths is responsibility achiever. And when I overuse those things, I'm like, come on, team, you give up whatever you're doing. Forget your personal life. We've got to get this done. And people are going, whoa. I've got a marriage, I've got kids, I've got a family, I've got social responsibilities, and I mean, obviously she's right. And I've done that before. And I've used those strengths too far, pushed too hard, didn't bring my personal self out. And so some of my other strengths, just to be confidently vulnerable, some of my other strengths are things like belief and includer, which, I need to include people I want to include people to be able to accomplish this, and to be able to include people properly. It's not just driving them with responsibility and achiever, it's including them and understanding, bringing them into the why, the what's behind it, what are we trying to accomplish, helping them to come up with themselves, have the desire themselves to be able to give that effort to accomplish that huge monumental task that's before us, rather than just drive it into them, from the top. That nobody wants that. I don't want that either. But so obviously, with a weakness of empathy, I may not be as empathetic to what other people have going on, but I can use some of my other strengths to balance that out. Like I really do care about people deeply, even if I'm not as empathetic as maybe I'd like to be.
Yeah.
Sure.
So that is, I mean, again, fascinating where this is going. Like strengths finders, really, there should be a weakness finders. There should be an equal one out there that does that as efficiently or as culturally prolific as strengths finders is, right? I would think. I mean, the other piece it seems to pair to, which is a long time ago, we had Matt Hunt on the Think and Link stage, and he came out of Best Buy, and he talked a lot about failure and the fact that we don't focus on failure enough. We need to focus on failure. We need to, and there's a culture, there's a city in India that has an extreme level of entrepreneurship success, and they attribute it to their talking about their failures. And it's like a part of the cultural conversation. Similar thing to talking about your weaknesses. It's fascinating. That's how I would, anyway.
That's some confident vulnerability right there.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And DeAnna, this what we're talking about empathy, because I remember this coming up in a previous conversation as well, and I'd love for you to expound upon this. We talked a little bit about appreciative curiosity and not assumptive.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about that as well, and how that applies to, right, this reciprocity between, or this peer-to-peer, or I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Let me comment about appreciative curiosity in the context of where Aaron just took us. So the whole idea of, in order for us to be our most effective self, we can't just look at strengths. We have to also be willing to look at weakness. And wouldn't it be great if we had a weakness finder that would help balance out our strengths? Aaron, I was going to say, we actually have created something that does just that. In fact, we call it Strengths Multiplier, but it includes, so it doesn't just reveal, here are the contributions that you're able to bring to task and to relationship and the qualities, but under what conditions are these strengths activated? And when those conditions aren't met, what will trigger that strength into showing up as a weakness? And what will that strength look like as a weakness? That information matters, by the way, because if I can go, here's my contribution, this is what these contributions need uniquely to this strength. And if these factors are present, this will show up at high energy and performance. If they're not, they show up at low energy and performance. And then you start to look at, here are the triggers you should and I should beliefs that just flip my strengths upside down, and I'm at weakness so fast my head will spin. And my maximizer strength, for example, will get flipped over because I get so worried about perfectionism. And the worry about getting it right will actually create unprecedented stress and anxiety and diminish my performance and energy so fast. We all have it. And so to know what our strengths look like as weaknesses, to know why they get flipped into weakness, to recognize all I have to do is come back and see what I need. Then I can flip my strength back to a strength. And that's really important. Now, appreciative curiosity, Kelly, that was a really important phrase. I'm glad you picked that up from our previous conversation, because it is a critical piece of self-leadership. It requires a no judgment zone about me and you. It teaches discernment, not judgment. This is really important because of what I had just said. Your triggers are framed by you should beliefs about other people and I should beliefs about myself. They're judgments. And appreciative curiosity then says, let's get curious about what's happening. Let's look and see what's here to be learned rather than to condemn or to blame. And when you flip that mindset around, again, this is a culture change thing, Kelly, when leaders start to look at their people through the lens of, instead of you should, and I'm blaming you, to let's step back and let's ask some questions. Let's see what's happening here. And we talk about, if you think about bringing in a little Simon Sinek, he talks about the power of why, and how often we don't stop and say what's truly important here. Too often we go straight to what's going on here and how are we going to fix it and why did you do this? And the why becomes a blaming thing. Right. And appreciative curiosity is not blame. And it isn't judgment. It's an effort to understand. In fact, we teach 3 simple questions. When you ask them of yourself or you ask them of someone else, almost always, it just opens the space. It creates connection, it creates insight, and it imitates empathy. That's the irony of it. So Shawn, you would never know that Shawn doesn't have empathy. You'd never know it. And I've become pretty good friends with him. And I'm telling you, I would never know that he doesn't have empathy because of the way he listens and how he asks questions. So anybody want to know the 3 questions? It always starts with, what are you seeing? What are you seeing? Remember that I'm seeing, if you think about your strengths are like a lens, a contact lens or a pair of glasses, you see everything through it. And when I ask you, what are you seeing? You're helping me see what I can't see. You're also telling me why you're behaving the way you are, or what's driving your choices or decisions in that moment. So what are you seeing? And then the second question that I love to ask, what does that mean to you? So however you answered, what are you seeing? I would take a word or phrase and I would say, Kelly, what does that mean? Now, as soon as I go to the meaning of your words, you will take me one step deeper. And if I follow you and I share back what I think I heard you say, what I think I heard you say was, you will feel heard. You will think I can feel all of what you feel, whether I can or not. Feeling what you feel is empathy.
Right.
But the ability to follow somebody's trail of thought or train of thought right down into the quarters of their heart. What do you see? What does that mean? And then the final question, what's important about that to you? The moment you do that, Kelly, it's like I hear your heart and I'm not judging you. And if you do those 3 questions, it's interesting. A lot of times I teach a 4th question as we get deeper, especially if there's frustration, is what do you need? Because many times, if you think about if you were to ask yourself, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? And what do I need to be my best? Most people could give you a long list of weaknesses, a sort of list of strengths, and a small list of needs. Right. But your strengths are not operating as strengths if your needs are unmet.
Wow.
I can't help but imagine what our government would be like if they actually acted like this and they communicated with each other.
No way.
Like it would be like unbelievable. We'd be miraculous, right?
Yeah.
If they actually listened to each other, worked with each other, understood each other, it'd be so awesome.
DeAnna,
it would be.
Can we just get you to DC, DeAnna, at some point?
right.
Infiltrate our government.
But, so we can't do it at government level, but hey, we can do it in our personal lives. And I can tell you 100% we can do it ourselves. And because we lead out and we do it personally, I can't tell anybody else to do it. I can share my thoughts with people and show them and give examples, but I know I can do that.
Right.
Myself.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing I know I can control when I learn about these things from DeAnna is I can do it better myself. And at least I can make the world a better place in my little realm of people that I get to interact with every day.
Yeah.
And he has done that. He has done that.
I'm still trying. I'm still working every day.
Every day, I would imagine.
I love it. We are the hope is that we finish a little bit early by 5 minutes because Shawn has to get a flight. That's why we're at 9 o'clock, and so he's going to literally jump out of his chair the minute I allow him to, and we finish this up. It's going to be gone to the airport and flying somewhere. I'm not sure where. I'm assuming outdoors somewhere.
Yes.
But I want to make sure I get a plug in here for Katadyn for outdoor gear and what people should buy if they're going outdoors. If they're spending time outside, it should be a Katadyn product. And Alpine Air food, freeze-dried food, one of our greatest case studies in the history of Capsule. When we saw you at the trade show and sales were doing great and you were giddy. That's all I can describe.
90% increase thanks to Capsule. Yay!
Oh, it was amazing. Huge sales increase.
We'll take all the credit, Shawn, but thank you.
Yeah. It was the larger team and the effort and a great product and a great team as well. So you have been an amazing client, and I love the suggestion of this pairing and coming together and having this conversation. This has worked out wonderfully. Thank you. And DeAnna, for all this wonderful wisdom that you've shared. This has been great. I know that a lot of people are going to be taking away things. I'm going to hear it in our team. We're going to be sharing things, I can tell, because there are already comments in the chat just to us. Like, hey, that's curious. We should talk about that.
Exactly. And DeAnna, really quickly, just for our audience, and again, we want to have this recorded so that people know how to find you. What's the best way to connect with you and your team? Because I'm sure this is inspiring to many of our listeners today. So give us it's a plug, but not, because I want to connect with you personally. So let's talk about how we connect with you, DeAnna.
Well, just the website is peopleacuity.com.
Okay.
So that's a good place to look. And, you know, I welcome the opportunity to connect with individuals. My strengths, I love the one-on-one. I'm very, very focused on the one, and always welcome. I respond to every email personally, and we'll take time anytime someone sends me an email with a question to do a little email coaching. So Murphy at peopleacuity.com. I'll welcome it with anyone. If you're stuck, you got a question, you want someone to kick something around with you, probably I'll answer a question with a question, but that's a coaching thing. That's
Sure.
Appreciative Curiosity, Kelly, living what we teach. So
Right.
But happy to help ask the questions that help people solve their own problems. That's actually our mission. It's not to solve the problem for them. It's actually to help them solve their own problems.
Right.
So that's where the power is.
That's great.
And what's incredible about DeAnna, she's one of the most selfless people that I know. She does this in an incredible way, in a one-on-one and in a group setting, and she caters this for people as you need something. She really works well with people because she recognizes that we're all individuals. We have different needs.
That's high EQ, isn't it, DeAnna? It's high EQ. Yes. IQ.
Deep love, I would say. I have a real love for people. It's very authentic. So.
Do we? There was a question that showed up on the chat. The 3 questions. DeAnna, could you give those back to us again? What were the 3 questions?
What were the 3 questions? Right.
Oh, you bet. Okay. Number 1, what have you seen? Number 2, what does that mean to you? So you wait for the answer. You look for a word or phrase, and then you ask, what does that mean to you? And then you listen again to the answer, and then you look for the word or phrase. What's important about that? And it just stair steps you right down. And honestly, inside of 5 minutes, that's why these micro conversations are so powerful. In 5 minutes, you can be right in someone's heart with them. And it's confidently vulnerable, and it's bonding. Wow. And when we're trying to keep people in companies, right, if we can have a 5-minute mini conversations that get people there, wow, right?
Yes, that is wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you. You know it's good when it goes fast, when we are done before we want to be done. And I feel like we could go on for a couple of hours, which was also a good indication. Thank you both for this wonderful conversation. Shawn, catch your flight. You can go. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you. Thanks, Capsule. Thanks, DeAnna. You guys are awesome.
Thank you. Great to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. Appreciate you.
All right.
Thanks, Capsule. Bye,
Thanks,
Shawn.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.